Andy, let me start off. Congratulations with everything you got going on, Michelle McCory. Fantastic, and congrats on the media launch and everything you're doing. So,
Thank you. I appreciate that very much. Yeah, we feel blessed that Michelle decided to partner with us, and so it's off to a strong start. And I think the sky's the limit with her because she is expanding, if you will, our reach into other communities. She'll be emceeing Bitcoin conference in Japan in September, and has a reach into the Bitcoin community where my idea is to unite the two communities because we're more alike than not. That we understand many of the reasons why we want to not save in dollars. And instead of being divisive and mutually exclusive, I think not only does the understanding of economics and monetary history and your portfolio become stronger. But there's no sense in being mutually exclusive of one another and not understanding the other argument. So I think that's one of the things that Michelle will do for us is help us expand into a segment of the investing public that should understand gold better, and maybe some of the people that I've been talking to for so long that are gold bugs will understand the other side of the equation a little better. And in the end, I think it makes everyone's understanding of things and their portfolio stronger.
do you why launch everything now? Because and I have a reason in my head of like why I do this, but what is your reason for doing this now? This episode is brought to you by McIlvaney Financial Group. Their advisors bring a depth of knowledge and experience that allow them to serve their clientele with care, ensuring their financial needs are met now and in the future. Personally, I'm not saying cash is worthless, but you can see what's happening. It's worth less every year. Gold is the opposite. Click on the promo link in the show notes or go to www.mcilvaney.com/coffeeandamike.
Well, I've been doing the podcast for 5 years, and Michelle and I did our first podcast 3 years ago, and it was the most watched video Kitco's ever put out at 1.6 million views on YouTube. And we had done several subsequently, and that had all had tremendous success. And it just worked out when she and I talked, and the opportunity presented itself. To me, timing wasn't even an issue as much as it was just I knew it was the right thing to do. So sometimes in business, you follow your gut, your hunch, and some things work out, some things don't. But I think you can't be paralyzed by indecisiveness. And when an opportunity presents itself, that's what they say luck is, right? When opportunity meets preparation, um, is it luck, or is it understanding that this is an opportunity that you're prepared for, you can't say no to? And that's kind of the way that I looked at it.
Well, and you're really, I mean, you're good on both sides, man. You're a good host, but you're also good on the other side in talking like this.
Appreciate
And
that.
Michelle obviously as well. I had Francis Hunt on last week, and maybe I told you this before. I was not familiar with Francis until I heard, and you brought it up on our first conversation in regards to where you two thought this whole thing was going when the new administration had come in. And I mentioned that to Francis last week, specifically with your name, and that was 4 or 5 months ago. I think the last time that we talked. When you guys said that, I was like, wow, this is where it's going. It's evident. Like the global monetary reset and how they've taken over MAGA. And so do you feel any different now that we're almost to the end of August from that initial conversation with
No,
Francis?
not at all. I mean, I think we're in the middle of a reset. I think it will be tied to gold. I think they'll use the stablecoin bill to fund the front end of the treasury yield curve of the market to keep the government going. And I think they will peg the back end to gold so they can reshore manufacturing by having zero borrowing costs, redeemability in gold. In other words, a zero coupon bond on the long end and a massively devalued dollar by revaluing gold, which is in essence devaluing the dollar. It might even set the stage for universal basic income for a large portion of the country for a while. Government would say we're going to help you for a few years. We'll do what we can because we need to bring back manufacturing. You can't do it at these interest rates, and you can't do it at the value of the dollar. And that's why I think we will lose the reserve standard. We will see countries trade in local currencies with one another and settle imbalances in gold. And that is what I really truly believe. And they will, as Judy Shelton said, peg the back end of the bond market to gold. And if you do that, you have zero borrowing costs and a massively devalued dollar, which is what you would need to bring back manufacturing and use the front end of the yield curve to be controlled by the issuance of stable coins to fund the day to day. I think that's where we're going. I truly do. And I think they will, in essence, soft default on the dollar. And in order to save the bond market, in order to reshore manufacturing, in order to at some point grow our way out of it, I don't see any other way you can do it. We owe $28 trillion in bond issuance that's already out there, bond redemptions in 3 years. We bring in 15 trillion in tax revenue. We have a $3 trillion a year deficit. That's another 9 trillion on top of the 28. That's 37 trillion with 15 trillion in tax revenue. The math doesn't work. And that's just in 3 years. That excludes many other things. And so, yeah, I would say to you that we are in the midst of a monetary reset right now.
Explain to me, as best you can, as like I'm 5 years old here, Andy, what the stable coin on the front end yield curve, what does that mean for regular people that hear that and they're like, what the hell is that?
Well, the stablecoin bill, part of the Genius Act, the stablecoins that will be issued will be backed one-to-one with U.S. Treasuries. And so in an environment where the Treasury is losing demand because of our inflation, because of our lying of the metrics by which we gauge inflation and unemployment, the CPI and the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which should just be called the BS, not the BLS, they will, all of this has made the rest of the world look for alternatives to the U.S. Treasury, starting with the weaponization of it by stealing Russians $5 billion in U.S. Treasury. But I think that in essence, what it means is that all of these treasuries that will be backing the issuance of stablecoins, which will become very, very pervasive. You'll see nothing but stablecoin issuance by the banks and by big corporations like American Express and MasterCard, and all in the name of ease and expediency. Where checks will become a thing of the past, where it's like Venmo and Zelle type of thing, but in the banking sector. And they'll all be backed by treasuries to give this synthetic demand for treasuries. And the front end of the yield curve means the short treasury issuance of 90 days or 3 weeks or 4 weeks or 1 year, maybe up to 2 years. The shorter duration treasuries will all be backed by the issuance of stablecoins instead of people going out and actually buying them. Now, there will be some demand for that too. The money markets and people looking to remain liquid for short term, they can buy U.S. Treasuries. But this massive boost of demand into the Treasury market through the issuance of stablecoins because of the passing of the Genius Act, I mean, it's crazy if you think about it, that you're going to have debt backing by debt. I mean, the dollar is debt, and standing behind it will be more debt issued U.S. Treasuries. So debt is backing debt. Doesn't seem too stable to me any way you look at it, but that is what they're doing in order to find a vacuum, or fill a vacuum rather, for the lack of Treasury demand. Where I think this is a perfect way to do it. And how do you bring back manufacturing? How do you pay this debt without letting interest rates spike? You can't. And interest rates should spike on the back end. So instead, you peg it to gold and have zero interest on the back end, and run the day to day through the front end. So the back end would be 10-year, 20-year, 30-year. That'll all be redeemable in gold, according to Judy's plan. So you have zero coupon on those long maturity bonds, but redeemability in gold. If you revalue the price of gold first, in essence, you're devaluing the dollar. And gold is held on every central bank balance sheet in what's called the gold revaluation account. Mike, you can't make it up. It's happened in 33 when Roosevelt, confiscated gold at $20, paid everyone 20.67. That 67 cents was a lot, with a dozen eggs being a nickel. And then he devalued the dollar by 40% immediately thereafter and made gold 35. Happened again in 72 and 3 with Nixon, who devalued the dollar from revalued the price of gold from 35 to 38 in 72. And from 38 to 42.22 and 73, that's in essence devaluing the dollar in each case, and revaluing gold. It's not without precedence. It's happened in the modern era, and some other countries around the globe have done it. And it's on our balance sheet at 42.22. Just marking it to market would give the Treasury 800 billion free and clear. You got guys like Mike Maloney saying 10,000. He comes to that number by dividing M1 into the amount of gold that we supposedly have. Or James Rickards, who says 24,000 M2 into the gold. And if you do it that way, every $4,000 increase gives the Treasury general account 1 trillion free and clear. And it's an accounting gimmick in the respect that the president would tell the Treasury to revalue gold. The Treasury Secretary would tell the head of the Fed, do it. And it's done. Doesn't even need congressional approval. And so in essence, they're massively devaluing the dollar. So if Jim was right, Rickards, and they put it to 24,000, the Treasury would get 6 trillion free and clear to pay off their debt and to do other things. Gold would be massively revalued in order to get that, which devalues the dollar. But in essence, what happens is the Treasury issues the Federal Reserve certificates, gold certificates, and they hold the gold as collateral. The gold does not belong to the to the Fed. It belongs to the Treasury and the American people. Just the cash value of it is what they have redeemability on claim to. But in essence, they print that money out of thin air. They would print 6 trillion and give it to the Treasury, which is highly inflationary, which would massively devalue the dollar, which would probably usher in universal basic income for a year or two. Our patriotic duty, we're going to do this to help us all get through this so we can bring back manufacturing, is what you would hear. Who would it benefit? All the central banks who've been buying it hand over fist, and the United States. And it would enable us not only to work down our debt, but it also would enable us to peg to the back end of the Treasury market. And Judy Shelton said to me, Andy, Trump told me. He told me when I was part of the transition team in 2016. She was his nominee to run the Fed in 16. She wasn't confirmed due to partisan politics, shockingly. But a lot of people think she'll be running the Fed in a few months. We'll see if that's the case or not. She's in the running for it. But she said he told me in no uncertain terms that he'll issue gold-backed treasuries on July 4th, 2026, which is a huge day for President Trump. He's going to make a big spectacle out of that day because it's the 250th anniversary of the country. You look at things that Trump has said along the way. He who has the gold makes the rules. You look at Treasury Secretary Bessent, a self-proclaimed gold bug, wants to preside over a new monetary system, like a new Bretton Woods, said he wants to remonetize the U.S. balance sheet. Well, you look at the United States government balance sheet, the largest asset of over 40% is student debt, not monetizing that. The next thing is military, aircraft carriers, bullets, guns, not monetizing that. Third is land. I guess you could put some parks and or hotels and amusement parks and stuff on national park land, but that's not it. What about gold, valued at 42.22 on the balance sheet? Why not remonetize that, which would instantly devalue the dollar, which would help in selling our goods to the rest of the world, create a lot of inflation, help us pay off this mountain of debt. A trillion seconds ago, Mike, was 31,688 years ago. You're not paying that off. Not a chance with 200 trillion in debt. Yeah, we have 37 trillion that we know of. How about Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security? Those alone are 150 trillion in the hole. Doesn't work. Math doesn't work. So you inflate to make paying off the debt easier. You devalue to bring back manufacturing and make our manufacturing, our products more competitive, and you lose the reserve status, which I believe we will. Vice President Vance said, look, it's not a benefit anymore. It's not. It used to be, but we screwed it up. There's something called Triffin's dilemma, which says if you are the world reserve currency, you'll always have trade imbalances. Always, because the world doesn't get enough dollars from us just through trade alone to facilitate their trade and their needs. So we have to export dollars. Those dollars, of course, many of which are just created out of thin air. That's why we see continuing inflation. But those dollars that we send across the world, they have to be purchased with the other currencies. So they sell their currency, which weakens it, to buy our currency, which strengthens it. And then along the way, we say, geez, in that weak currency environment, we could send our manufacturing over there and save gazillions. That's what's happened. You will always see that, the hollowing out of your manufacturing. And that's why we have this huge trade imbalance. We have 60% of the country with no college education and no manufacturing base. and AI that's going to kneecap a whole bunch of white collar jobs. Where are we going to pay this off through production? What do we produce? Nothing. AI, yeah.
Weapons,
Tech,
weapons, Andy,
yeah.
weapons.
Yeah, but that's part of the silver side of things too. But yes, we do that, and that's why they've held down silver. But yeah, so you're talking the military-industrial complex again. The rich of the rich of the rich get richer and richer and richer, and the rest of the country is in trouble. And so yeah, I think that is exactly what's going to happen. You have to reshore manufacturing. It's noble. You have to. We can't let things that are strategic like aircraft components and military components and the microchips. Remember all the cars that were during COVID that were just sitting and no one could buy them because they needed microchips? Or how about the fact that we buy pharmaceuticals from around the world and don't manufacture them here anymore? All of this stuff needs to be reshored. We need to put people to work. We need to manufacture again. I could see them issuing universal basic income for a year or two, saying we're going to do this, we're going to get through this, but for our children to have a future, this needs to be done. And it does. But the only way to do that is to have borrowing costs at zero. Because if rates go above 5% on the 10-year treasury, we saw what happened. Silicon and Signature, poof. When rates go higher, everything in this country that is distorted because of suppression of interest rates, stocks, bonds, real estate, the banks, the insurance companies, are all loaded with treasuries. As rates go higher, those treasuries go lower, the whole thing blows up. It implodes quickly with leverage. And so I think they can inflate, they can default, or they can do it this way, which is option three, a soft default on the dollar in order to support the bond market. You use the stable coins to run the front end. You use gold to run the back end with zero coupons, so it's zero borrowing costs. You revalue gold to massively devalue the dollar. You bring back manufacturing, you build it up, you become the epicenter of ingenuity and of production, and you produce more than you consume. That's how you get ahead. That's the brick house and the little three little pigs. You produce more than you consume. And we have, for the last 50 years, consumed more than we produce. And that's why we are where we are. And we've suppressed interest rates, which created distortions in asset prices. If rates rise to where they really should be, not controlled by a handful of bankers, instead, the market's supposed to control it, not the bankers. If rates rise and you find equilibrium with asset prices, the whole system implodes. That's what happens when you mess with Mother Nature. There was always that old commercial, you'll be sorry. Well, we will be in the end. There is no way easy out of this. This is why they want to keep rates lower, not just to make paying off debt easier, but the whole system is leveraged. You can't let rates go too high. So how do you bring back manufacturing and how do you sell those goods with a high price dollar and higher interest rates? You don't. So you abandon the world reserve currency status, just like Vice President Vance wrote on White House letterhead, speaking of Triffin's dilemma. Not a good thing for us anymore, he says. Maybe it's not a benefit. It's not anymore because we've screwed it up through greed and indebtedness. And if rates go higher, we're dead. And then you weaponize the dollar like we did against Russia. No one wants our treasuries. They don't trust us anymore. Look, we invaded Iraq 22 years ago and we're still there. We went there looking for weapons that were never there. We destroyed their country, toppled their regime, and we're still there. So the rest of the world looks at us like hypocritical as hell. You can do this and say this about them and kick them out of SWIFT and take their treasuries and take that 5 billion that you took and give that plus another 190 billion to the Ukraine in the form of weapons, and you're in a war against these people. You don't come back from that. The rest of the world says, no, 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 no. This is going to happen to us. We need to find a back door, and that's what is happening. And so I think the world is changing right out from underneath us right now. Either you get that or you don't. But this stablecoin bill is nothing what people think it is. It is a way to fund the workings of the government through backing of the stablecoins with treasuries. That is how you find synthetic demand for something that is losing demand. And if Judy is right, and they do peg it to the back end of the bond market, gold that is redeemable, you can have a zero coupon bond. You may actually be able, through revaluing it and devaluing the dollar, to bring back your manufacturing, grow it, and grow our way out of this problem by the next generation. Who knows how long it takes? But when you're talking 250 trillion in debt from all of the unfunded liabilities plus the on balance sheet, 200 to 250, game's over already. And mathematically, a trillion seconds ago was 31,688 years ago. It's over mathematically. So how do you do it? This might be the only way. It's a Hail Mary but I see the merits of it actually happening. I mean, I see it as a legitimate shot if they can pull it off. And I think that is what they're intending to do from everything I see.
You talked about universal basic income, and do you see them? They'll label it something else, like, oh, we brought in so much revenue from all these tariffs that we want to give it to the American people, and we're going to give you a set amount each month for the next whatever 12 to 24 months. Is that what you see them wording it differently to make
Yes,
it appear?
exactly. 100%. 100%. Yes.
What type of short-term pain do you anticipate for regular Americans that have no idea this is coming or don't understand what you just explained?
If you save your money in dollars, you're destined to go broke. If you're not a contrarian, you're destined to be a victim. The dollar's down 11% already this year. Gold is up 38%. That's a net 50% difference. Um, and the dollar, I believe, will be destroyed. I think you'll see more people talking about the sacrifice of the dollar in order to save the system. It's just mathematics. And I think that is the bottom line is that if you look at wealthy people, they are wealthy because they have assets, not because they have all their wealth in dollars. They have assets that appreciate. Um, and and that's a big one. I think that um, if the reason that the rich get richer is because they have much in the way of assets. And when you talk about a currency that's continuing to devalue, holding your money in dollars is the silliest thing that you can do. You're losing purchasing power every single day. And the wealthy people, they continue to make money because their assets continue to appreciate. That's the most important thing, and I think that is something that needs to be understood. They understand that real wealth is through appreciation of assets, and not through holding money in dollars. That I think at this point is about as silly as it gets.
What about people that they're riding on their 401ks or they're riding on their, say, state or federal pensions in the next 5 to 7 years? Like, I'm under the impression maybe that money is there, but the value of it, to what you said, will be worth. I mean, the purchasing power of it will be so low that it won't be there. It'll be there in theory, but it actually won't be there, or it won't be there at all.
Well, pensions are a bigger deal than the 401k would be to me, certainly. And by the way, the the thing we were just talking about is called the Cantalon Effect, where the elite benefit first. They get the money and they take that money and put it into assets. And by the time the money trickles down, it's in the form of price inflation. I was trying to think of the name of the economic theory, Cantalon Effect. But yeah, the 401k thing is, I don't love it because almost everything is tied to the stock market or the bond market. You don't have the ability to be to self-direct it. Pensions are another issue altogether. I mean, a lot of these pensioners that they would people running the pensions had, you know, unrealistic expectations of return, and so a lot of these pensions are destroying corporations and cities. You look at the pension, the teachers' pension, like in Chicago or California. I mean, they're broke, and so what happens when you get to that point? Yeah, so I mean, the whole system is changing, but I would say that you know, if you have a 401k, if it were me right now, I would do the best I could to get the hell out of the way of anything related to the stock market. Since June 1st, you've had Bezos sell 6 billion in stock. You've had all of the institutional since June 1st, the hedge funds sell between 2 and 4 billion a week. You're seeing Jamie Dimon sell stocks. You're seeing the three largest shareholders of NVIDIA board members sell a couple billion combined. You're seeing Warren Buffett with 500 billion in cash. This at the same time as the retail investing public is all into the highest level ever in the stock market. At the same time, highest level of margin debt ever and highest level of option exposure ever. As the insiders are going the other way, what could possibly go wrong? I think they're telling you with their actions. You have a stock market that has separated from reality. It's separated from the economy. You have you look at the unemployment numbers that were supposedly so great in May and June, about 500,000 combined, and they just readjust them down to 75,000. So wait, you're saying it wasn't 500,000 jobs that were created? No, no, it was 75,000. Oh, that's a little bit of an adjustment. They lie about the metrics by which unemployment is calculated, and they quietly readjust them 2 months later. They lie about inflation numbers. Saving in dollars, you're in trouble. And in terms of the stock market, the insiders are all leaving. And at the same time, we've seen the largest deliveries in the history of the COMEX market every single month, month over month over month over month, and almost all of it's leaving the COMEX, which is even crazier. It's not just being delivered to COMEX, it's leaving the ecosystem. So yeah, it's a deal where the biggest money in the world is all leaving the equities as the public is all in all-time highs in participation in margin debt and options. That's all speculative and leverage. And the opposite is true in metals. You have the biggest money in the world standing for delivery and draining the exchanges in COMEX and the LBMA that the central banks buying it hand over fist for the past 5 years. Biggest money in the United States is now doing it to where we become a net importer for the first time ever. 100+ billion that we know of, and I would assume a lot more is coming in not through the COMEX. At the same time, the public has no exposure to it. What could possibly go wrong? You have the most opposite contrarian indicators. Insiders all in commodities and getting all out in equities. The inverse with the retail public. So yeah, I'm very nervous about being in traditional assets right now, heading into the end of the year. I am quite nervous. I would say you're better off to sit on the sidelines in a money market, earning 4% and sleep well at night if I'm right. I guess only time will tell.
Well, and also too, going back to the UBI here for a second, because if people, the layoffs, it sounds like you correct me here, Andy. The layoffs will continue to go up. More people will be out of work, so they'll sell the idea of the universal basic income to provide some type of liquidity to these people in the short term.
To the ones who need it because they're going to be a victim of the devalued dollar and inflation. Yes, that's right.
And what is that going to do in terms of the cities? Because you're seeing, and we've talked about this. I mean, you're from Minneapolis. I live in Phoenix. These cities are decaying more and more and more and more. So when you have the fallout of people out of work, what could that do potentially to some type of more unrest because of the
For
anger
sure.
it's going to cause?
For sure. Well, and then you get into the socialists. I'm afraid people will flip-flop and, blame it all on the right and they'll go back to the left. And that's why I left Minneapolis and moved to Florida. Even though my corporate office is there, that's for another reason. It's because it's the only state in America that regulates what is a federally non-regulated precious metals industry. It holds us to a much higher standard. But, you know, it's one of these deals where I would expect those cities would be hit very hard. And I think you'll see a lot of people leave those cities. I mean, if we see what's happening in Minneapolis and New York with Muslim, very almost socialist, anti-capitalist mayors that look like they're both going to win, you're going to see the big business people leave, like I did, and vote with their feet. And that has nothing to do, nothing against the Muslim religion. It's just that in this case, it's not only something very new, it's also something that is anti-American. That is not their religion, but their views on capitalism and socialism and taxing the rich. And when no one seems to realize that this isn't the problem. You have lower taxes, you have greater economic activity. I can see that for myself in Florida. It's more along the lines of spending. They all have addictions to spending, and they think the way to do it is revenue. And how do you get revenue? Through taxes. And so all the people will leave. And living in Florida, where I don't pay Minnesota state income tax of 10% anymore, is amazing. And all that money that I save goes into the economy. And you see a greater vibrant economy. They don't have income tax in Florida, that there's a big surplus here. How do they do that? Just what I said, because there's greater revenue in sales tax and in other forms because people are putting their money to work instead of paying it to governments who don't give a crap about us and do things like waste it in stupid endeavors, you're going to see people leave those states, which only makes it worse and worse and worse. And then it's kind of a doom loop because as more and more people leave, the ability for social services, fire, garbage collection, police becomes harder. Not enough revenue, so that gets hollowed out, and more people leave, which has a greater effect on civil services, and more people leave, and all of a sudden you get Escape from New York type of situation where it's just chaos. Now, God forbid that were to happen, but that's the stupidity of these socialist ideas, and capitalism is what's made this country great. And um, it's nothing is perfect, but a system where you strive to be the best you can at the best price. Well, that is what business should be. It's about meritocracy. It's not about woke ideology. It's who can do the best job at the best price um, for the customer with a smile. Well, that's the one who's going to win, he or she. And when you give it to the government in the form of handouts and anti-capitalistic deals, you kill incentive. Who wants to work harder in a socialist endeavor? It doesn't do you any good. You're sharing, redistributing your efforts, your wealth. Um, I just think that this is real. It's happening, and you'll see a greater divide between ideologies. So that's the sad part of all of this is that, a lot of people are so blinded with their anger at President Trump that they won't even give him a chance. I think what he's doing, if I'm reading it right, is rather noble, but he will be hated for it by a lot of people. Maybe someday he'll go down as one of the better ones, if not the best, for having the courage to do this, to stand up to the face of all of the stupidity that we've seen over the last 4 years and how ingrained that had become, where their actions were too stupid to be stupid, but it was destroying this country and everything special about it and whitewashing our culture, and which is wrong. And so I give him credit for having the courage to stand up to these institutions, to the deep state, to and maybe he's not perfect, and maybe he is part of it. Is he the Trojan horse? Is he riding on it, or is he the horse? I don't know. Time will tell, but it just seems as though he's the only one that has courage to stand up to these ideals that, in my opinion, were destroying this country at an exponentially fast pace. And God bless him for doing that. And if I'm right on what his endeavor is economically, it will be the best thing to ever happen to your kids and your grandkids.
Well, and also, to your point of what you just said, I mean, more people are just withdrawing from the system because they don't believe in it anymore. I mean, I was just reading about, I don't remember the percentage, but healthcare premiums are going to jump up in 26, a significant amount. And what are people going to do? They're going to look at that and just start to remove themselves from it because it just becomes so astronomical that it doesn't even make sense anymore.
Yeah, and they keep going higher and higher and higher, and you get denied for a lot of things that you should have. And um, it's crazy. It really is. And they're now anything that's preventative, you'll get denied, and they'd rather fix it once it breaks instead of helping you maintain a healthy lifestyle and get better and be proactive. They're just moving to a reactive model. The whole thing sucks. Insurance is terrible, and but it's getting more and more expensive. Try home insurance in a place like Florida. After a couple of 2, 3 hurricanes, the whole thing I think is getting to that point where the cost of things like insurance. They tell us that CPI is going down, but it excludes food, energy, and housing and things like insurance that continue to go higher. Um, is just another example. Tuition and all the things we need are going higher in price. The things that we want, like flat screen TVs and whatnot, well, they're getting cheaper. But look at food. It's not in the CPI yet. It keeps going higher and higher and higher in cost. And now you got people taking payday loans to buy food. And, they're paying for,
The buy now, pay
um,
later.
yeah, yeah,
For Grubhub,
exactly.
Andy. For Grubhub.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I saw that for burritos. I did see that. I did. Chipotle burritos, 3 payments over the next 3 weeks to buy a burrito. Well, that's the problem. And so, we're lied to about the cost of living with inflation being as high as it is. were lied to about that. So, anyways, Mike, this is all, kind of you have to see the crumbs and try and put them together. I have either the stupidity or the courage, I'm not sure which one it is yet, to say it out loud, but I really do believe we are in the process of destroying the dollar to finance our debt, to support the bond market, to bring back manufacturing, to grow our way out of a problem that mathematically we're getting to the point where there is no growth potential unless we fix it right now. And maybe that's what he's doing. Let's hope so. But I do know that if you are one of the people that has all your assets in dollars, you're destined to be broke. If you're one of the people who's clinging on to the system who has money, but, well, I don't know if I believe that. Well, if I'm right, if you're not a contrarian, you will be a victim and you will be run over by this. And I think it's at that stage of the game, historically, mathematically, philosophically, where changes have to be made. And those changes will center around the monetary system. What is money and what is wealth? And um, it's one of these deals where I think this is, well, history books will look back and say the passage of the Genius Act was the beginning of a new monetary system.
Do
And
you
we're right there.
do you think that in your own lens, your own sphere, that people are waking up more? And I'm not talking about people that listen to your show, listen to Michelle, listen to my show. They have somewhat of an understanding of what's going on, if not a great understanding. But the masses, like when you're at the supermarket, how many people, have any idea or would even want to know what you've just spent 40 minutes talking about?
Virtually no one. There are a lot of people who might sense it. They feel things aren't great. They can't articulate it. And that's because the world has gotten very tough where, when you and I were kids, dad could go to work and mom could raise the kids and you could live comfortably, take vacations and do all sorts of stuff with one income. Now you can't even come close to doing that. And so people are so exhausted by the time they come home, they don't have the energy to sit down and listen to you or me to open their mind into other theories when they're just trying to make money and heaven forbid try and figure out economics and monetary theory and how to save it. If people put as much effort into making or saving money as they did in making it, they'd all be a lot more successful. Instead, they turn it over to financial advisors who now have a vested interest in keeping you captive because it used to be they made money by trading stocks. Now the stock trades are free. They make money by keeping you under management. And so these people don't really, their model is that as long as they do well by you, then they do well. But they're they don't have the same vested interest in preservation, perhaps the way we do after spending our entire life working to make the money. So yeah, most people don't know. Financial advisors won't tell them about it. The financial media won't tell you about it. But if you look, you have the most well-informed traders in the world that understand this and are de-dollarizing, selling treasuries and buying commodities and standing for delivery, which removes counterparty risk. So yeah, I think that this stuff is understood at a certain level, but the mainstream doesn't have a clue yet. And that's evidenced by the fact that you have the insiders leaving at 2 to 4 billion a week out of the equity markets as the public is all in the greatest allocation ever, even more than the great financial crisis or the dot-com bubble, where you had about 52%. It's like 54% of all stock market action is done right now, held by mom and pop, retail public, and the largest percentage of margin debt ever, and the largest allocation to options ever. That's leverage and speculation as the insiders are going the other way. What could go wrong? When Bezos sells 6 billion of Amazon since June 1st, why? What does he need the money for? He's already, right there, the number one or two richest men in the world. Why sell it? What are you going to do with it? Is he the one buying gold? Maybe. Who knows? Who took possession of $7 billion worth of gold the first 3 days of the August contract? Goodbye, all left. I used to say 1% of contracts stood for delivery, COMEX contracts, or less. And that was that way my whole career, 30 plus years. And now the first 3 days of the August contract, over 2,000 contracts were posted for delivery. 100% were posted for settlement. Most would cash settle or roll over to the next month. In this case, would be December. No, 100% of them, not 1%, 100% stood for delivery. And it's mostly all leaving the COMEX. Where is it going? Is it going into Bezos's basement? Is it going into Warren Buffett's basement? Or is it the Treasury under the guise of Exchange Stabilization Fund, which can do it quietly if it's for national security? Don't have to tell Congress. Maybe, I don't know, but I know that 100 billion that we know of has come in and probably a lot more than that. Where's it going? Why isn't anyone talking about it? Why are the insiders selling at record levels and going to cash like Buffett with 500 billion in cash when the public is all in? I mean, from a contrarian indicator, I don't know that you'd find a more pervasive or um, a stronger argument to not be in the equity markets because the public never wins compared to the big money who's moving the other direction because they're closest to the information. It's not even all the money. They swim in circles of people that have the information, and that is worth more than the money that they're putting to work. Knowing when and how and what to expect makes making those speculative purchases much easier, I would think.
Do you do what are your thoughts on, like, for the younger generation, the out of high school right into college? I mean, my friend Matt Smith and Doug Casey just put out their book today called The Preparation, which provides an alternative plan for people that don't want to go the traditional route. And you see that argument with the boomers and the younger generation of the, you know, it was tough when we were growing up. It's same thing. I think it's tougher for these younger people. What are your thoughts?
It's way tougher. I mean, the opportunities are disappearing. I really do believe that. When you see AI coming in, my son who works for me now wasn't out of college, went to work for Price Waterhouse as an accountant, became a CPA, and was being paid as a first year accountant at Price Waterhouse 75 grand a year to analyze a balance sheet of a real estate investment trust. What the hell do they need to pay him that for when AI can do it in 2 seconds? um, you're going to see job creation just disappear, I believe. Um, there'll be other things opening up, but the mundane businesses that and opportunities that a lot of people had. How about if you're like an architect? How fast can AI draw a blueprint that it takes an architect all this time and effort to do? Sure, you need someone there to. How about a radiologist? Why not have AI go through all of these X-rays? Have one person to go over. I mean, so the point, all of these fields will be changed, dramatically changed, and so I think that's why you have to bring back manufacturing. And I would say, if I were a young person, I would focus on opportunity, like maybe, you know, for sure take AI no matter what field you're in, AI how it relates to the language of it. But there will be opportunities in things like IT security, learning how to information technology, learning, the tech side of things. Go to where IT will either accentuate what you're trying to do or won't affect it at all. Maybe plumbers and electricians are the next high paid salaries in this country, as they've been. No one wanted to do that for the last 20 years. So how many people really have gone to tech school to learn a trade, become a plumber or electrician or, whatever. And
You know what the ideal job
these are
is,
very
Andy? Not to
important
cut you
things.
off. The elevator repairman. Have you ever met anybody that
Yeah.
repairs elevators? It's got to be
Yeah, actually, a
it's
guy in my neighborhood does, and he's busy, 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 nonstop. And I live in a golf community, and we always say, "Why don't you golf with us?" Because I'm always working, he says. So he's a busy guy. But yeah, there are things that will constantly need the human aspect of it. So that's what I would do. And to go into fields that are right in focus or right at the target of AI is about as dumb as you can be right now. You have to pivot and do something that will give you a fighting chance. You have to stand out. Um, Maybe learn Mandarin at the same time.
I was up in Reston, Virginia back in June, and we were talking to a guy that was working for Amazon Web Services, and he was saying how they can't find electrical engineers to build these data centers. He's like, we can't find them. We're in such
Right.
demand for these,
That's the
but
point.
yeah.
Learn a trade, and that's what you have to do. But that would be the advice I would give. And I would also say, understand the laws of compounding and let them be your friend instead of, like everyone else, work against you. Start saving today. Put a portion of every single paycheck you have into something like gold or silver. If it's Bitcoin for you, do it in Bitcoin. Whatever it is, find an asset, not in dollars. Find an asset that you can buy and compound your effort through time, through interest, and you and I were talking off air how you've gone through a transformation yourself physically, and it was through time and effort and energy and letting the laws of compounding of time and effort be your friend, being regimented. Well, the same thing is true in anything in life. If you want to succeed in bodybuilding, in relationship with your husband or your wife, with saving money, with being good at anything. You want to become a good golfer. You don't pick up a golf club and become good. You have to practice every day or as often as you can and become regimented in it. Even if it's 10 minutes a day, swinging a club out in your front yard or putting in your, on your kitchen floor, whatever it is, you have to do those things. Well, the same thing is true with saving. And the best gift I was ever given by my father was 36 years ago when he said, if you don't buy something every 2 weeks, I'll fire you, when I was 19. And I'm like, fine. Well, I've owned the company outright for 2 decades, but I have honored my promise to him. And I bought, whether it be an ounce of silver or whatever, every 2 weeks for almost 36 years, the best gift I've ever been given. Prioritized paying myself first and speaking to my 55-year-old self. Next week, I'll be 55, saying, you're going to be 55 someday. You're going to have 3 kids. 2 of them are going to be girls. You'll have 3 college educations, 2 weddings to pay for, and your own retirement. You better start saving. And I'm glad I listened to my 55-year-old self back then. All right, man, I got you. Like, because if I didn't, life is like a roll of toilet paper. When you're young, it spins very slowly. You don't notice it. You start to get older, it's spinning faster, and you can start to see the cardboard. And you better realize that time catches up. And so it's the compounding of effort and time. So start saving now and focus on things that won't be a target of AI if you are looking to make a change or deciding what to do with your life. That would be where I would start.
The rest of the world is watching what the United States is attempting to do. What, in your view, BRICS, China, Russia, what are they seeing? And then what is their counter move, or what are they anticipating how it will impact them?
I think that you're going to watch the BRICS nations are setting up an infrastructure that'll be very hard to supplant. They already have their bridge technology that is settling in 7 seconds outside of SWIFT. It's already been connected. China connected recently to 11 Asian countries and 5 Middle Eastern countries. Those 11 Asian countries in Southeast Asia, ASEAN is the name of their group. They are already China's largest trading partner by far, almost 3 times what they trade with the United States. They have double the population of the United States, about 800 million. They're already connected to it. Enables them to settle in 7 seconds outside of SWIFT through all trade, trading local currencies. So, and by the way, you have Saudi Arabia is connected to this as well, and they are a actual one of the 5 main partners of this bridge technology. So China can buy oil from Saudi Arabia, pay for it in digital yuan, and they simultaneously, when they set this up, the Shanghai Metals Exchange said we're expanding our reach to multi-jurisdictional vaults all around the world to expand the reach of the digital yuan. The first one was just built outside of Shanghai in Hong Kong. They said you can trade your digital yuan immediately without converting the dollars into gold. It's like being backed by gold in essence. And then they said the next one is being built right now in Saudi Arabia, and then we will issue them all throughout the Belt Road, a multi-jurisdictional chain of vaults, which would be like the skeletal system. So they'll trade with one another in local currencies, settle imbalances in gold in a whole bunch of vaults around the world, starting with Shanghai, in Hong Kong, in Saudi Arabia, throughout the Belt Road, the new exchange in Singapore, the new St. Petersburg exchange, the Moscow exchange, the new BRICS exchange. They'll all be connected. And so all these people, all these countries will trade with one another, free from SWIFT interference in 7 seconds at a 98% reduction in fees, trade their stuff across border, and then settle imbalances in gold. The gold won't replace the dollar. The gold will, in essence, replace the treasury. in its role. And each one of these currencies, they'll be forced to keep their monetary house in order, to not be fiscally irresponsible, so that countries will trade with them. But imbalances will be settled and redeemable in gold should they want to do it that way. And that's already operational. And I think that's why the U.S. is importing so much gold. I think they understand that if we don't join them or try to beat them, we're going to be rolled by them. And I think that is what this is, a new system, a new monetary system where it's less about the trust in opaque debt instruments like the U.S. Treasury. The debt of a broke country is an asset, really? How about gold, which has doubled the performance of the 10-year Treasury for the past 25 years? Look at last year. The Treasury was up 4.5%, gold 45. Look at it this year. Halfway through the year, that 10-year Treasury is up 2.5% or less, and the dollar's down 11, but gold's up 38. So why would you hold your money in treasuries that can be weaponized and sanctioned and inflated and rehypothecated and all of these things when you can buy gold, which is beating the performance tremendously of of the Treasury and has no counterparty risk. This is a new monetary system. This is why the stable coins will be used to create synthetic demand of the demand that is leaving organically. And that's why you would peg gold after you revalue it to devalue the dollar to the back end of the bond market, the longer duration, to bring back manufacturing to zero borrowing costs. The devaluing of the dollar allows you to sell those products to the world and become competitive again, because Triffin's dilemma says you will never be able to have a trade surplus for an extended period of time when you're the reserve currency. Too expensive. So that's what happens. And I think that this is the only option they have left in front of them, if I had to guess.
Well,
I don't see any other way to do it.
what did you? Two questions. I know I'm running out of time here with you, but what about the idea of an escalation of war to also kind of take away from be a distraction from what's occurring here in the United States?
Depends. I mean, it's one thing to go and bomb strategically military sites in Iran. It's another thing to start messing with China and Russia and India. I mean, you have three countries in the BRICS nations that are three of the four largest nuclear arsenals in the world. So, I mean, what kind of war can we do at this point? You want to start poking the bear, that's a whole different story. So, yeah, maybe even those options aren't once what they were.
The what were your thoughts when you saw what occurred Friday in Alaska?
Um, I think that it's the right thing to do. I don't know what they discussed per se, but I think Putin is holding more cards than he's ever held. They are already waning dependence on the U.S. dollar, and they're forging relationships with other countries. They're trading with other countries and accumulating commodities and selling treasuries. And I think it needed to be done. I think the damage that the previous administration done is to the globally and to including to countries like China and Saudi Arabia and Russia, all of it. I think it is embarrassing and hideous. But I give Trump credit for for doing it, for having the courage to do it, and it's the right thing to do. And I mean, no one wants to have war with a country like Russia, and there's no reason we need to be at each other's throats. But I would rather see um, I would rather see good relations than bad or than none at all, and it's the right thing to do.
When I saw that, I was talking to a friend of mine, and I just share this with you really quick. And he pointed out, the United States literally rolled out the red carpet, and Trump walks, he's walking vertical, and then he stops, turns, and Putin's coming horizontal. The red carpet has been rolled out for him, and they shake hands, and then the B-52 flies over, and I'm like, we're in a reality show. Like this is just, this whole thing is just theatrical. I don't even know. Like it was like a stage. Like it was just so. We rolled out the red carpet and it was, and none of it I don't believe was done by accident. The walking, the long
No, of
walk,
course
and the
not.
meeting like the
No,
way they
of course
did.
not. But that's where how far we've come. Where it's better to let the world see that, hey, instead of letting this escalate potentially into World War III, that we are at least doing what we can do to show the world that we're serious about letting cooler heads prevail. I'll give them credit for that, and I guess we'll see how it all plays out. But it won't stop the formation of the BRICS. It won't stop the de-dollarization. It's not going to turn Russia into our overnight ally, but it certainly should be addressed, and there's absolutely no reason that we need to vilify Putin. And I'm not speaking about war or any of the things that people have impressions of Putin, fine, but what we've done in Iraq is no better as far as I'm concerned. You destroy their country looking for weapons that never existed. And there would be probably people there that would tell you they liked life under Saddam Hussein better than they do under the current system. Um, Again, I'm not trying to make any declaration or opinion on war or who's right or who's wrong, but what I'm saying is when you are the world reserve currency, it is not for us to be judge, jury, and executioner. It's not our prerogative to say who can and can't use the dollar or buy treasuries. That's not the right thing to do, and you don't come back from it. And I think that we've gotten so far to the other side. It's about time that we see cooler heads prevail, and it's about time that we see an extension of the olive branch rather than, you know, continuing this aggression, whether it be veiled aggression or real. It's time that cooler heads prevail, and that we try and mend fences that are broken. And we don't need nuclear powers, coming closer and closer to war than ever before through, you could argue the previous administration and even the current with funding of the Ukraine war, the giving of weaponry, the providing of military assistance and technology and the intelligence on where to fire the weapons, using American weapons, flying into or dropping them into Russia. It's a provocation of war. I mean, if it was the other way around and we were in a war with Mexico and Russia was providing them military support, weapons, and the intelligence on where to fire it, isn't that war? Aren't they culpable too? So I would argue that it's about time. God forbid, you get one pissed off, nuclear submarine guy who says, fuck it, I'm just launching it. And boom, there it goes. I mean, as movie hypothetical silly as that sounds, I mean, how close could we be to that at some point when we're continuing to aid the Ukrainians instead of just making it stop, helping and trying to make, or just getting out of the way and stop meddling in everyone else's affairs? I don't really know any nice or articulate way to say that other than to say we should have listened to our forefathers who said don't meddle in other people's affairs. We should close our military bases around the world, which are bleeding this country dry, bring all of them home, put them to work building our infrastructure, rebuilding the country, and be a friend of the world rather than the policeman of the world. Now, maybe there are those who understand geopolitics better than I that would say you can't do that, but look at China. They're a superpower, you could argue, militarily for sure, but they don't get involved in anything. Why? Why do we get involved in everything? I guess that's part of being the world reserve currency too, which I would argue is on its way out. So it would be better to be more nationalistic than global, and in my opinion, and be better for this country. Just the amount of money that we're spending to be the world's policeman is crazy, and the 150 or 200 military bases around the world that, why are we still in places like Germany or Japan? Why? What the hell are we there for? Or many other places. So I don't know, man. I think it's just one of these deals where this is coming to an end. This new system is here. And if you don't realize that really being in dollars is the single biggest mistake you could make for your financial health, I don't know what more of a wake-up call you can get, but look at what the biggest money in this country is doing. They're standing for delivery to the tune of well over 100 billion in gold since the beginning of the year, and it's all leaving the COMEX. Silver too, 7 billion in silver was delivered in the first 5 days of the August contract. Almost all of it left COMEX. That's never coming back. It would have to be reassayed. 1,000-ounce bars ain't happening. So who's taking possession of several semi-trucks worth of silver? Where's it going? This is money that is not only substantially big money, but they also are closest to the information and they know where things are playing out. You wouldn't see this kind of volume by the central banks and the big money here unless they had a real good idea where things were going.
What was your last question? What was your thoughts when you your research and your conversations connecting the dots to seeing what it is they appear to be doing? What was your initial reaction?
Who appears to be doing?
with the Trump administration and the global monetary reset and the devaluation of the dollar, like what
I mean,
when you
just
figured it out and you
I've
connected
been
the dots, and I mean, did you have an initial reaction?
my initial reaction was it's actually quite clever. It's actually quite smart, and it would be the only way to do it. I mean, Richard Russell, my mentor, used to say 15 years ago, the Fed is too far trapped with indebtedness. It's either inflate or default. And when I put it together, saying, oh, that's how you get your manufacturing back with zero interest on the back end of the bond market and redeemable in gold, revalue gold to devalue the dollar to make our exports competitive, use stable coins to run the front end of the market to give the engine of finance to the U.S. government. I mean, it just makes perfect sense. And first step would be to reshore all the gold, lie about your motive. It's arbitrage and tariff related. No, it's not. It's reshoring. Talk about revaluing gold, and now you're seeing everyone. The Federal Reserve just came out with a paper on it. Senator Lummis from Wyoming has been talking about it for a while to fund the strategic Bitcoin account. I mean, all these things are coming together. I think it's if I'm right, I think it's the only hope that we have to make this country special again in the respect that we need to be the engine of not just ingenuity and in the form of financial assets and IT, but also we need to make things again. And that's how you put people back to work in an environment where this new technology will be massively deflationary over time. It's just going to kill um, opportunity for a lot of people. So we need to do this, not just for that, but we can't be reliant on the world to make our aircraft parts and our microchips and our pharmaceuticals and all of these things. We need to do it. And it's time to lose the reserve status. When Vance said maybe being the world reserve currency isn't a good thing anymore, when Trump said he who has the gold makes the rules, when Judy said he's going to do it, he's going to issue gold-backed treasuries, when we see all the gold coming back here, all of these things are like, yeah, it's happening. I don't know. I think it's genius. Not my ideas, but if what I see is true, the whole thing is genius.
And the future of the Federal Reserve through all this?
Neutered for sure. I mean, and you'll see greater power by the Treasury, which will take back a lot of what the Treasury does or the Federal Reserve does. The inability, their dual mandate of stable prices, the issuance of treasuries through the Stablecoin Act will give much more power back to the Treasury and take a lot away from the Fed. Maybe someday they're gone. We don't need a Federal Reserve as far as I'm concerned, but take away a good deal of their power. But there's no coincidence that Stephen Mirren, who took over for the vacated spot, he's the author of the Mar-a-Lago plan. He wants a devalued dollar. That's his whole thesis. He's not going anywhere. So either that or you just put people in the Federal Reserve who understand what you're trying to do. Ultimately, maybe it leads to getting rid of the Fed, which would be great, but um, little by little, I guess. You got to take baby steps first.
Where can people find you, Andy?
The best way would be to send us an email at info@milesfranklin.com. If you want prices, let us know. We will send you our price list, which we don't publish on our website. It will be as good or better than anywhere in America. We update it twice a week, not as much as I'd like yet. If you find prices better, let us know. Chances are we'll beat it. We've never had a customer complaint in 35 years, and your listeners won't be the first. Be nice to let us know that they heard about us on this show in the subject line, heard about you on Coffee with Mike, and that would be great, so that we can keep track of it. But info@milesfranklin.com. Any questions that you heard on this show or anything else, or just the price list. And of course, our YouTube channel is Miles Franklin Media. Our website's milesfranklin.com, and it would be our pleasure to help, certainly. I appreciate coming on with you. I'd love to do it again. Do it more regularly when you have time. And there's a lot going on. There's going to be a lot to talk about over the coming weeks and months.
Andy, I always enjoy our conversations, and we got to do one episode where we just talk about baseball and sports. Maybe we'll put the world
Now
problems
you're talking.
aside for a minute, and maybe we'll do an episode dedicated to that. But I always enjoy our conversations, and
So
always,
do I,
and I
brother.
appreciate you making time for me. And congrats again on all the everything you're doing, and I look forward to following your work and continuing to watch your show.
Likewise, my man. All the best to you, Mike, and let's do it again soon.
Mic drop.